Hey everyone, and welcome back. So today we're going to be reviewing Blossom Tales 2 on the Nintendo Switch. Now this game is a retro-styled top-down action-adventure game, very much in the style of an old-school Zelda. It releases today, August 16th of 2022 on the Nintendo Switch eShop, and it'll be selling for a price of $14.99. The game was developed by Castle Pixel, but it is published by Playtonic Friends, and it has an overall download size of 273 megabytes. Now, the first Blossom Tales game is definitely what I would call an indie gem on the Nintendo Switch eShop. So because of that, this second entry already in my book has some expectations to live up to and the beginnings of a possible legacy. Now the question is, does this game measure up? Well, that's what we're going to figure out in today's review. Now remember, if you are liking the content, one of the best ways to help support the channel, just hit that like button. Now if we begin with the storyline. Now just as the first game, this one has the same setup, where it plays out as a campfire story that a grandfather is telling their children. So as you play through the game, you'll have that fourth wall breaking down, where the grandkids and grandfather will break in and adjust the story depending on your choices. Now for those of you who have played the first game, even though this game features the same protagonists, just as the Zelda series that it is inspired from, this adventure is a completely separate quest from the first one. Now during a festival, where unfortunately Lily gets defeated by her brother who cheats to beat her in a sword-wielding contest, she makes the unfortunate wish that her brother leave and never come back. Unfortunately, unknown to her, this unleashed the Minotaur King, which comes and abducts her brother. Now the whole game will play out as a quest where Lily sets out to reach the Minotaur King and bring her brother back. Now just as in the first game, the whole storybook setting here works perfectly for this game. And although the interventions of the grandchildren and grandfather will pull you slightly out of the action, they never last long enough or are too frequent where it really ruins the experience, and I actually think it adds to it quite a bit. There's even certain points in the storyline where you'll get to choose what type of enemy you face or what type of puzzle you need to solve. Also, the fact that this story is not directly related to the previous one allows them to create a brand new map and brand new world to explore and not be tied down by what was introduced in the previous game. Overall, I find that the general storyline here has a really nice pacing to it. The characters you meet throughout the journey are very interesting without becoming too dialogue heavy, and the quests you go on are varied and interesting. So at least so far, storyline wise, everything is pointing in the right direction. Now if we move on to the gameplay. Now gameplay wise, you'll know exactly what to expect from this game if you've played the first entry, or if you've played pretty much any old school Zelda title. The general quest set out for you in this game is to recover the 3 pieces of the Minotaur key that you need to reach the fortress of the Minotaur King. To do so, the game will set you out on a quest throughout the land, where you'll have to meet various people, complete certain quests, and ultimately also a few dungeons. Now the game quickly equips you with a sword and shield, which will most likely be your primary line of defense. However, you'll also acquire rapidly a whole inventory of different items to use, either to complete different challenges, or solve certain puzzles, or confront different types of enemies. As I mentioned earlier, for those that are familiar with Zelda-like titles, this game really doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it does reproduce the formula perfectly. And even the items that you will acquire through your adventure will be easy reference points to what you already know. You'll receive a bomb that will allow you to blow up rocks and uncover certain passages. You'll receive a yo-yo that acts pretty much like a hook shot. And if you adventure off the beaten path, because the game quest-wise never really brings you to it, there's even a master sword to discover. Where the game does differentiate itself slightly from the Zelda series is that you do have a dodge roll mechanic and an energy bar that you have to manage. What's interesting, however, is that this energy bar not only powers your dodge rolls, it also is the energy you use to use your special items. So it's more like a combined energy and magic bar. I really did appreciate that fact because it made the exploring in the game much funner, where you don't have to worry about running out of bombs by testing different areas to see if you can open up secret passages. Now, once again, just as what you would expect from a Zelda-like title, your health bar is represented by hearts. You can fill those by finding different heart pieces throughout your adventure. 4 heart pieces will increase your meter by 1 heart. You can also increase your energy bar in the exact same way, however those are done by collecting energy stones. Once again, 4 energy stones will extend your bar. At this point, you're probably wondering, is this just a cheap Zelda knockoff? And I did mention earlier that unfortunately the game doesn't reinvent the wheel. However, as I pointed to earlier, it's such a refined formula at this point that it's hard to inject something new into that. But I really do find that this game here does a super good job of making that formula its own and having it fit with a different overall storyline. And the good news is that throughout my whole adventure, although there are a lot of references to Zelda and other classic gaming franchises throughout the game, I never felt like I was just playing a copy of a game. I really felt like I was playing a new installment in the Blossom Tales series. And I think that the part where it was the most apparent was the layout of the dungeons that felt very original, and also the different puzzles you had to solve really felt fresh and new, like things I had not seen before. Obviously, you can always find a reference point somewhere in some game. However, at the same time, the way they're put together here felt fresh and new. What also surprised me a lot about the game is that it offers a pretty decent runtime. I think most people, unless you dive very deep into the side quests, will be able to complete the game in about 10 to 15 hours of gameplay. And at only a $15 price point, that's actually some very good value. I also really found that the pacing of the game was very well done because it never felt like the game was artificially extending its playtime. Everything had a purpose and you were constantly exploring new areas. So overall for me, the gameplay delivered a very fun and satisfying experience. Now if we move on to the controls in the game. Now the first thing that I always like to see is the game does give you the option to either play with the left joystick or using the D-pad. But other than that, it's a pretty simple 4-button control scheme, where B will swing your sword, Y will use your first special item, A will use your second special item, and finally your dodge roll will be set to X. And the game even does give you the secondary option to be able to dodge roll with the R2 trigger. Now there is no fast swapping items in the game, you will have to do so through a menu system. However, I understand why you have to do so, because given the number of different items that you'll acquire throughout your adventure, a quick swap system would have just become unmanageable. Now if you've played the first game in the series, you'll know exactly what to expect here, because it is almost a carbon copy of the first game. However, it works very well, so why try to fix something that isn't broken? Now once you're in that menuing system, there's actually quite a few uses there, because that's also where you'll find your overworld map. Now this will help you keep track of where you've been and where you're going, having your next objective always highlighted in yellow. I found this very interesting in helping and keep the game going on a good pace, because although it sets you out sometimes on some pretty vague objectives, at least you know what part of the map to search to find your answer. To use a potion in the game, you'll also have to equip it as a special item and then come back to the general game screen to use it. And just as a side hint, potion building in this game is very important. Make sure you find as many empty jars as possible, as it will really help you get through the dungeons and ultimately the final boss. Overall, it's a very simple and well-built setup that any Zelda fan or even newcomer will be able to adopt very quickly. Now if we move on to the graphics and sound. Well, once again, graphically, this game is using the exact type of pixel art style as the first game. And if you enjoy the retro pixel art style, well, I do find that the Blossom Tales series does a very good job of creating a beautiful world using it. It uses great contrasting colors to really highlight objects in each and every environment, and on top of it, it's easy to identify what part of the map you're in simply by a very different color scheme associated to every different location. And performance-wise, there's absolutely nothing to worry about here. I didn't suffer any frame rate drops or any problems with stuttering. I know some of you will say that shouldn't happen for a pixel art game, but unfortunately it does. But the good news is, Blossom Tales 2 is definitely not counted among that group. If we move over to the soundtrack now, we've got some great chiptune music to accompany that beautiful art style. And what I love is just as music should be used in these games, it's really there to set the mood. And it varies generally depending each different zone of the map. Once you get to the more ghost-filled part of the map, there's a little spookiness to the soundtrack. When you're in your starting village, there's just a happy warmth to it. And finally, when you set out on the final leg of your adventure, there's a certain foreboding letting you know that the final confrontation is coming up. Overall, if you're into the retro pixel art style of gaming, well, both visually and sound-wise, Blossom Tales 2 is a great offering. Now we get to the verdict, and if this is one of the first reviews of mine that you're watching, you can check out my full review scale down below in the description of the video. Now in the case of Blossom Tales 2 on the Nintendo Switch, I'll be giving this game a 9, putting it at the low end of an excellent game. If I'm totally honest, this game actually surpassed my expectations. I thought it would be a good and decent offering, but I didn't think I'd have as much fun as I ended up having. And in my opinion, it really took everything that made the first Blossom Tales great and set up an even better pacing and more fun world to explore. And if you're wondering if I liked it so much why I just didn't give it a 10 out of 10, well, that's simply because to get that score, it would have had to bring something new to the genre. And as I said earlier, although I do find it refined its formula very well and is offering a great Zelda-like title, it didn't really bring anything totally fresh and new to the table. But honestly, in my opinion, for any action adventure fan at only $15, this is an amazing pickup. So now let me know in the comments down below. Are you going to be picking up Blossom Tales 2? And do you agree with my review? And don't forget, on the way out, if you did like the content, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, and click on the notification bell so you know when all my future content comes out. And as usual, I hope I'll see you in my next video.